Right.
It's indeed a pleasure to talk on criticism in general and on post-colonialism in particular. I thank Dr. Marin, Head of the Department of English, MR Government Arts College, Manargudi, and his faculty members. Special thanks to my student, Professor Ponkarthiyan, for recording and visualizing this. Post-colonialism. Before we go into post-colonialism, I think that we have to take a deep note of what is meant by colonialism and its effects. Europe's dominance over the rest of the world began in the 15th century. The countries of Europe, England particularly, and to a lesser extent France, Spain, Portugal, and Netherlands colonized many countries and states, and the European Empire extended over a large territory of the world. Great Britain was the single largest imperial power, ruling over a quarter of the world by the end of the 19th century. By the 1930s, colonies and ex-colonies covered nearly 84.6% of the land surface of the globe. Only parts of Arabia, Persia, Afghanistan, Mongolia, Tibet, China, Siam, and Japan had never been under formal European government. Europe claimed superiority due to the color of the skin, religion, and culture. As Edwards said, white man's burden or service to people of other race, religion, and culture. They thought that it is that civilizing mission to correct the whole world. They also developed a disrespect of the old ways of thinking and living. So what they did is they thought that they must lift the poor people, the other people, by some means or other, and the means is to set colonies to live in their own lands and to migrate to rule over them. They also thought that it is better to market their products in such places. So this is the beginning of colonialism, and this is the cause for the spread of colonialism. And the colonial countries, they became settlers in some parts, non-settlers in some other parts, and partially settled in some other parts, according to their own convenience. First, they became settlers in Africa, Asia, Canada, the Caribbean, and the Ireland. In countries like Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, the English people colonized and established their culture. But in these countries, as settlers and colonizers, they did not face much of an opposition. They had only Canadians, New Zealand people, and Australians. They had only a shorter struggle for independence, because they had the loyalist tendencies towards the motherland or mother country. There is also the absence of the problems of racism and the imposition of a foreign language. Second type is they are not settlers in countries like India, Jamaica, Nigeria, Senegal, and Sri Lanka. In these countries, they introduced their culture by force and imposed their institutions and norms. So what happened? They forced the people to follow their culture and their norms and institutions. In third part, they are partially settlers in countries like South Africa and Zimbabwe. And we can see this very beautifully explored. This theme or this idea is beautifully presented by Joseph Conrad in his novel Heart of the Darkness, where he talks about Congo being referred by white men as a dark nation. Darkness stands for ignorance and stupidity. So this is the concept of white men about the East. And they also, in the partially settled lands like South Africa and Zimbabwe, they damaged the indigenous culture of their lands, and they reshaped the physical territories, social terrains, and human identities. So this is what happened in the case of the colonizer. They colonized as settlers, non-settlers, and partial settlers. So when we look at the impact of colonization, we just for three questions probe into the mind of post-colonialists. First question is the suffering and the loss of life can never be measured. In various struggles, rights, freedom movements, people, the natives were killed at random and in crowds. So we cannot measure, for example, in Jallianwala Bagh, we cannot measure the number of people who died in the massacre. And second is history, culture, and the political, socio-economic matrix of such lands have been completely ransacked. They lost their individual identity, the history, culture, and the political, socio, and economic matrix have been completely ransacked by the colonizer. And in such a case, the third situation is the colonized became rootless in their own land, whereas the colonizer became inescapably the self, and they made the colonized as the marginalized other. So people, the natives, became the marginalized other in their own land. So there were voices of anti-colonial sounds not only at a political level but also at intellectual level. They affected the colonized people even at emotional level. So this colonization is at political level, intellectual level, and even at emotional level. So there came a struggle to represent, create, or recover a culture and a selfhood. So it became very intensive need. It became an intensive need to represent, create, or recover the culture and the selfhood. Because culture and selfhood both were symmetrically repressed and eroded during the colonial rule. Symmetrically repressed and eroded during the colonial rule. So the colonies under British colonial rule gradually came to an end at different times in the 20th century. India attained independence in the year 1947, and by the year 1980, England had lost all its colonial possessions. And now when we come to the term post-colonialism, if you use the word post-colonialism with a hyphen, it becomes a historical marker, that is period after colonization. of after colonialism. But when we use the term post-colonialism without a hyphen, it means against the colonies, against the colonizer, reading against the grain. Francis Bacon, and others in their introduction to colonial discourses and post-colonial theory, they distinguished between post-colonial used as a temporal marker and used to indicate the analytical concept of greater image and ambition as a post-colonial theory or as a post-colonial condition. So, post-colonialism is a historical marker of the period after decolonization. So, it signifies both changes in power structures after colonialism as well as its continuing effects. So, when we come to colonization, there is a concept that colonization continues even after independence, and that is though the colonies have left us, though the Britishers have left us, just we have to analyze whether the thinking process of the colonized has met with a change. It is structured, the thinking process of the mind is structured in such a way the collective consciousness is controlled by the colonizer. So how far we are independent, that is the question that comes to the mind of the colonized. So the post-colonial studies study the mind, whether colonization, how it continues even after independence. And second part is neo-imperialism. Here they argue that still some form of domination is prevalent in all the colonized countries, in all the colonies. This neo-imperialism is in various forms. Like we take pride in saying that I am from Oxford, I am Cambridge returned. So it is in some form or other still existing in a different mode. So when we come to the third thing, post-colonialism, it acts against the effect and the aftermath of colonization. So the lingering effects of colonialism still continues. So analyzing these aspects, like how colonization continues even after independence, neo-imperialism and post-colonialism is analyzing these aspects is called post-colonialism. And here colonizer, whether he has left his identity or taken it back, his identity and ideology is still accepted. It's considered great. White man is considered to be the alter ego. The West is considered to be the greatest, whereas the East is only a reflection of the West. So as Gayatri Spivak puts it, it is like othering. In literary studies, post-colonialism emerged during the late 1980s, or rather in the early 1990s. This was influenced, post-colonialism was influenced by the works of great men like Frantz Fanon. The Wretched, his work is The Wretched of the Earth, which was published in the year 1961. Edward Said's Orientalism, published in 1978. Homi Bhabha's Nation and Narration, 1980. And Helen Tiffin and Bill Askoff's The Empire Writes Back. So that was in 1989. All these works were anti-colonial, and they talk about the political movements responsible for getting independence and local self-governance for colonized nations. When we think of the nomenclature post-colonialism, it refers to all the culture affected by the imperial process from the moment of colonization to the present day. From the moment of colonization to the present day. So, this post-colonialism, it analyzes and examines the aftermath of colonization and the effects of colonial oppression. So, when we come to colonialism, post-colonialism in literature, before that we can have a look at Frantz Fanon's book, where he talks. This post-colonialism is against universalism. Why they are against? Because when they say that it is universal, they always stress on the Eurocentric notion of the West. And they say that it refers to the Eurocentric norms and practices, and they are just elevate themselves to a higher status, and all the others, especially the East and the colonized, correspondingly they are relegated to the subsidiary or marginalized world. So that is why post-colonialism in literature is against universalism. And this ancestry of post-colonial criticism, as I said earlier, it can be traced in the first work of that is The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon was a psychiatrist from Martinique, and he argued that the first step for colonized people is finding a voice and an identity is to go back to the past, reclaim the past. What happened in the process of colonization, the colonizer they ransacked the whole past history, culture of the lands. So what happened, if at all we study, even in academics, we give importance only to the history from the period of colonization. So the past history, the cultural heritage of the colonized is relegated to the past. So here in The Wretched of the East, Fanon stresses that it is necessary in academics to teach our children about the great heritage, cultural and historical heritage of the colonized. So it's very, very important, because what happened for centuries together, the European people, they are colonizing, not only colonizing the land, but also they have devalued the past of all the countries. So it becomes, when we look at the pre-colonial era, what happened, we see, they picturize. For example, when they talk about India or South Africa or Nigeria, they refer to the lands as a pre-civilized limbo, and they also say that even as a historical void, they do not know the richness of Indian history. So they just cover that, and so it is important. Children, both black and white, will have been should be taught this, to see that cultural and historical heritage, richness of their country, and also the progress as beginning with the Europeans. So it is necessary, it is very, very mandatory to know the past, to reclaim the past. This is what Fanon stresses in his work, The Wretched of the East. And the second step in this post-colonial is to erode the colonist ideology by which the past had been devalued. They just completely eroded that, and moreover, if at all anybody makes a reference to the past history of that land, the Europeans, they devalued, only with the devalued notion, they referred to the past history of colonized. So here, Fanon stresses, the post-colonial stress that it should not be so. The richness must come to the forefront and must be known to the world. So it is very, very important to know the past history which had been devalued by the colonizer. Another book to inaugurate this post-colonial criticism proper is Edward Said's Orientalism, and very beautifully he exposes the Eurocentric universalism. So post-colonialism first attacks universalism. In the name of universalism, they always become Eurocentric, European-centric, praising themselves, and they always establish the Europeans to be superior to the West, or the Europeans to be superior, and they always never failed to mention that the East is inferior. It is not so, but according to the Europeans, it is like that, and they have picturized it so in the name of universalism. So Edward Said also exposes the meaning behind, the specific meaning behind the term Eurocentric universalism. So he identifies, not only that, he identifies a European cultural tradition of Orientalism, which is a particular and long-standing way of identifying the East as other and inferior to the West. So here he brings out, he just gives the picture of Eurocentric universalism, explains it, and how East is taken or thought of or given in history, and finally he establishes the misconcept of the eastern part of the world as something more akin to a fairy tale. So he is just he says that this is only a misconception. He mistrues the Eurocentric universalism misconstrues the concept of Orientalism, and this type of thought and marketing, this is only a marketing of Europeans, and this divides the already segregated world. That is the notion of Edward Said. He says that this type of marketing and thought divides the already segregated world. East is completely different from the West. This is the way they created the other, and by his single book, the first book, Edward Said tried to redo all that has been done by the colonizer. So he brought in that concept of Orientalism, what it stands for, the richness, the heritage, not only in history but also in culture and language. Very beautifully he brings in. And Gayatri Spivak also, in her work, she is stressing on the knowledge and power of the eastern side. He says the other. It is always referred to as the other, but here she says that it stands for, the East stands for knowledge and power. And another famous post-colonial writer, Foucault, beautifully he brings in the power relationship constituted by the modern knowledge pool. And here he says, in the name of religion and also in the name of racism, they are demeaning and telling lies about the East. And he brings in with examples, explains the greatness of the colonized people, the cultural and historical heritage of the colonized. And when another famous post-colonialist is Homi Bhabha, he talks beautifully about the nation and the narration, and he gives importance to the language. When we see the post-colonial reading, we'll talk about the language, and Homi Bhabha is the one who talks about language in his essay, Nation and Narration. And when we come to, and here he says that language may be used, narrative may be used, but only to establish what your nation is. It is the connecting link or creative link of a nation. And the very famous major theoretical account is the book The Empire Writes Back. Of course, this is taken from, the title is a little bit taken from Salman Rushdie's work, article. Here they analyze, the authors analyze a wide range of post-colonial texts. It is like a critical study of post-colonial texts, and they establish the mighty forces working in all the post-colonial texts. It is like post-colonial criticism, very powerful. First major theoretical account of all the post-colonial texts, very beautifully established. And here also they are analyzing the Eurocentric notions of language and literature. Very beautifully they bring in the Eurocentric analysis of language and literature. So when we come to post-colonialism in literature, how we are going to analyze, how we are going to do a study of it, we can split it into four. That is, first one is colonizer. First thing is colonizer. There what we do is rereading the text of the colonizer. Colonizer, rereading the text of the colonizer. For example, we can take Shakespeare's Tempest. There, Prospero is like the British. He comes to an island. He takes the land from Caliban, his mother, Sicurus, and finally he becomes the king of the land, great imperialist, and he arrests Caliban and makes him a slave, makes him do all the work for him. And Caliban, when we come to the language part, I will quote that, becomes literally a slave. He grumbles, moans, cries, abuses, everything, because in his own land he has become a slave. This is the rereading of the text of the colonizer. And second one is colonized period. Literature that is written during the colonized period. Here, what happens, this period, what happens, it is divided into, colonizers are divided into colony agencies, and finally what happened, colonies or colonizers or criticized indirectly or hidingly. We can see this in the situation that happened to Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore was asked to write by very great men of that period to write a song in praise of George I. At first Tagore became very furious and he said, no, I won't write. And then what happened, he said, okay, I will write, and he wrote Janagana Mana. And he said, I will never come in front of George I, when he comes to England. I will not appear before him. I will not read the text, but I will write this and give it. So he wrote Janagana Mana in praise of India, though he was supposed to write a praising hymn for George V. So this is what, indirectly we are using some agency or other to praise our land, not straight away telling I am like this, my land is rich in culture and heritage, but beautifully he says that it's such a wide land with various, though there is diversity, he says there is unity. That is why we have that Janagana Mana as a national anthem. So Bharati, our greatest national poet, another greatest national poet, Bharatiya, he too has written such a lot, very daringly, indirectly, hidingly against. He had that great courage to sing, to say that that we have attained freedom even before we have attained. That is the greatness of Bharati. That boldness is that. And this is the second thing. First is reading colonizers. Second, reading the texts that are written during colonized period. And third is refers as reading after 1947. That is after independence. reading the literature written after 1947. When we read that, we can understand that feeling of freedom, freedom in expression, freedom in thought, freedom in action, how they feel free, mentally free to write whatever they like, because we have the right freedom to speak and write only after independence. So we can see that beautifully they are picturized or portrayed, or they are present and prevalent in literature, in post literature that is written after 1947. The last part is we have to, in post-colonialism in literature, we give importance to the language part. Here, as I told in Tempest, Caliban says, you taught me the language. Prospero says, of course, about Caliban, I taught you the language, but you used the language to abuse me. That is what is happening. So we got the language from the rulers, from the colonizers, and used the language to not to abuse, but to present our real situation and also our cultural heritage and historical greatness. And not only that, even now, that is a sort of retaliation or attack against the language of English. So those Salman Rushdie has written the whole novel in English, Midnight's Children. Everywhere he uses certain words, like he uses the term chatnification. That's what is that makes even Arundhati Rai in her novel What Are Small Things, she ends the novel with a word from Malayalam, Nallai. That's how she ends. Though the whole novel is written in English, and she says Nallai. So, in the case of post-colonialism in literature, we want to collude the values of the colonizers or resist and challenge the essential past of the program of the methodology, and an inherent clash between the native indigenous post-colonial cultures and the culture imposed on the natives by the imperial forces. So there is always a clash between our own culture and the foreign alien culture of the colonizer. So when we come to this, we can very beautifully see in Chinua Achbe's novel, Things Fall Apart. He is very powerfully portraying the conflict by having Okenko, the major character of the chieftain of Igbo culture. He is standing there, and he is not, that is a very strong personality. Slowly he is ransacked, and finally he dies because he couldn't tolerate the clash between the values in his own culture and the influence of the alien culture. And very beautifully the conflict is brought out, the influence of the Western culture is brought out by Chinua Achebe. And when we come to the cultural colonization, this cultural colonization still exists. Still we are for foreign goods, foreign clothes. This cultural, that is aping the Western, apes of Westernism. We call it apes of Westernism, and there has been no complete decolonization as far as culture is concerned, because that impact of culture is that strong that even the youth who are born in independent India, they are for the Western culture. That is the strong grip of the alien culture. We are not able to release ourselves from that tackles. And much of the post-colonial criticism is concerned with the loss of post-colonial identity. That is the great thing. Our identity is lost, and we are in search of our identity. Of course, when we read American literature or the other literatures, we can see this search for identity. Even in a country like India, which has got a very strong culture and history, known for its spiritual heritage, even here we are in search of identity. That is the pity of being colonized for so many centuries. And this colonist discourse, the language, represent the language in which the colonies expressed their superiority. So we go in more for the word sir than to say I. So what happens? The discourse, the language that we use is mostly patterned or structured or controlled by the alien imperialists. So we are losing our identity. We are trying to regain. We must regain. That is the concept behind post-colonialism. The identity, language and discourse, and culture. Everything must be returned. That is the concept of this post-colonial rereading of the text. And when we come to post-colonial reading, the first concern of post-colonialism, as I have already mentioned, it represents an attitude to resist colonialism. We should not. We must be careful. We are not still ruled by the colonies, so we should resist colonialism. What for? To set up or to set up our own, to step outside, to influence, to reclaim our past, and to resist colonialism. That is very, very important. And here the concept is to reclaim an autonomous and free identity. That is we should have that autonomy from that colonial views and concepts and identity. So here what happens, it discusses post-colonialism discusses many problems as the hybridization of culture, universalism, language, cross-cultural recovery, the suppression of indigenous traditions. And when we come to universalism, it is rejected. Universalism rejected because it gives importance only to the Eurocentric, as I said earlier, about the superiority of the West, and East is always referred to as the other. So the first, when we look at the characteristic of, when we do the post-colonial reading, and when we look at the characteristic features, the first thing is an awareness. It's a necessity to create an awareness of the representatives of the non-Europeans as exotic or an immoral one. This is one is within single quote. They always consider us as exotic and immoral. They do not give a true picture of what is what, especially the East. When we go through E.M. Foster's A Passage to India, we have to remember that E.M. Foster is an Englishman. Not only that, he is a secretary to one of the kings of Madhya Pradesh, who had a liaison with the Englishmen, a strong supporter of the English. So what happens? We are not able to comprehend the true India from the picture given by E.M. Foster. It is partial and it is prejudiced, and it is not a true account of what we see in India. It is only an imitation being the other. It's not a true picture of India. So this is the first great concern when we read literatures or any book on India written by other people. We must go in for the authenticity or genuineness of the text. And second thing is the language that is used there. It is the second area of concern of post-colonial reading, the language. And it's very, very important to read the language. We must use our language. our way of, that is, doesn't mean that we should not use English, but English in reflecting our culture and history. That is very important. Language is only a medium of expression. So we need not bother that we got it from the Britishers, but what we should do is we must use it in such a way that it expresses our culture and our history, our identity. That's very important. And third is they give an emphasis on identity that is doubled or hybrid, as I said earlier, hybridization of culture. And here they always talk about this Chinua Achebe. He was an African, but what happened? He studied in convents, and he worked in the university, capital city of Lagos, and he also worked in, he also did a broadcasting job. If being doing all these things, how can he bring out the value of the civilization? But that is the question. They always question the doubleness, double identity in Chinua Achebe. But he is able to bring out his African identity very beautifully in the character of Okonkwo, and also the conflict going on in the Western, because of the Western culture and Western education and missionaries, very beautifully in his novel. We see that. So the very important next aspect or concern of this post-colonial reading is they take three words: adopt, adapt, and adapt. ADOPT. Second word is ADAPT, and third is ADEPT. Adapt is skill. Adopt is to follow. Adapt is to take in full. And here in the first phase, what happens? We took the form and language of the Britishers, adopting, following that form. And here in the first phase, the post-colonial literature is more like a humble apprentice of what is in the Britishers, taking the form and then language. And when we come to the second phase, it is like a mere licensee, that is the adapt. They take the form but express their opinion. Taking the license of form and language, but expressing their opinion very freely, independently. And third phase is adapt. Here in the third, the writers become independent completely. They are not bothered that the form is theirs or whether the language is theirs. It becomes more their own, and they forget the concept that it is borrowed or the form and the language. But what happens? They take freedom, become skillful, adept in using the form, literature, novel or short story, and writing their views, expressing their concept, and it becomes more of a European form, and subject matter is Indian or African or any other country. So what happened? Because of the independence, the independence that they have gained, what happens? They are able to see their own specification with reference to the European norms. They completely forget all that and take in their own concept, their own thing. And here it becomes, they completely forget the colored glass of a ruler, and they become completely an adept in the skill of using language and the form. So this is how post-colonial reading is done, and because of that, the purpose is to promote your own interest, values, agenda, and there is an ample space for this in the curriculum for the youth to develop it. And today the more preference is given in the texts that show more mirror to the nature. So here it helps us to reclaim our past glory and the cultural heritage. So this completely rejects the concept of the gap between the rich. We have to remember that as in nature everything is equal. Everything is equal. It rejects the concept, post-colonialism rejects the gap between the rich and the poor, superior and the inferior, the lord and the servant, hegemony and the subaltern, and finally they want to analyze the text with historical, physical, ideological, psychological, gender and cultural perspectives. So, to unveil subjugation, injustice, violence, discrimination, inequality, post-colonialism examines humanity as such, taking together without giving importance to any other discrimination. This is the greatness of post-colonialism. It is a necessity because we have to think, are we free? That is the question, as W.H. Auden says, are we free? We at present we are free in politics, but we have to question whether we have to free in the realm of culture. To gain that, to become gain that, reclaim the past, it becomes essential that post-colonialism must become part of our academics. Thank you everyone.